All right, so let's play a little game. All right? Are you guys like, well, let's see, let's do this. Let's start naming lines from movies that everybody in the room might recognize. All right? Yeah.
If you're not first, you're last.
What movie is it from? Does everybody know that? All right, so there's some people who didn't know that, so you don't get a point. Yeah. Say what? What movie is that from? Does everybody know that? You don't get a point. All right, you.
There is no try, only do.
There's no try, only do. Do you know what movie that's from? Which one?
Empire Strikes Back.
Empire Strikes Back, yep. Okay, yeah. All right, Star Wars is taken. All right, yeah.
Dang it, there's so many Star Wars quotes.
Good one. Yeah. You can't handle the truth. What movie is that from?
Oh, I know that
What movie was it? All right, you don't get a point. Yeah. You shall not pass. Thou shalt not. Thou shalt not pass. That's what it is. What movie is that from? No. I thought it was Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail. Yeah, what's yours? Everybody knew that one, right? So you get a point. Who's got points? Okay, yeah. All right, yep.
I can feel it in my nuggets.
What movie is that from? All right, yeah. Ka-chow. Cars. You got a point. You got a point. Back there.
That's an easy point. I would take that.
Oh, I am inevitable.
No. Avengers Infinity War.
Life is like a box of chocolate.
Okay, yeah. You get a point on that one. Yeah.
That's got to be the best pirate I've ever seen.
You're going to do that? What movie is that from? Yeah, okay, back there. I think this is the start of a wonderful friendship. What? What movie? Casablanca. Oh, yeah. All right, here. Oh, Harry Potter. Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
All right, a couple more and we'll be done with this part. Yeah. Supercalifragilistic. All right, you get a point. All right. This is where the fun begins. What's that from?
Star Wars.
Yes.
The Phantom Menace.
The Phantom Menace. We've done Star Wars. All right, last one. Guys! Goonies. Yeah, well, you don't get a point for that. Goonies is a little. Nobody, the rest of people didn't know. All right. Okay.
We need to go back to the future.
Okay. All right, you got a point. All right, so
Get to the top.
all these movie quotes are very familiar because the movies are very familiar, right? So today we get to take on one of the most familiar stories in the Bible. It's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Or shake the bed, make the bed, to bed we go. Or my shack, your shack, and a bungalow. Or
Why do you call them Shadrach, Meshach, and
that is the best. That is a great idea. We should call them by their Hebrew names. What were their Hebrew names? Shadrach was Hananiah. Yeah. Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael. All right. So we should call them by their Hebrew names, but we don't. It's just the way it is. All right. So even though we don't know the context or the storyline of some of the movies that we heard quotes from, We may not know the context or the storyline really of this very familiar event. And so today, hopefully you can get like a director's cut version of this event. All right? Cool? All right, let's take a look at it. I want you to read Daniel chapter 3 real quick. You close to being done? So you'll notice in this passage there's lots of things that are said repeatedly, right? Like people of every nations, languages, tongue, that kind of stuff. The list of the instruments, that kind of stuff. Whenever in ancient literature they repeat something, it's for emphasis. It's to make it an important thing. So as we go through this, pay attention to the repeated or restated phrases that you might run across. Let's take a look at what we learned from this thing. Oh, I should put this on. Do not disturb so I don't get messages. All right. Let's take a look first at this statue that is starting off. And by the way, I think the answer to the question of why we call them Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is because that's what they're called in this chapter. They didn't use their Hebrew names because it was a Babylonian experience. Right? First off, let's talk about the statue. Wait a minute, I'm in the wrong chapter. I'm in the wrong session. Let me go out of this command period. Wrong session. That was yesterday. Come on. Come on. There you go. There you go. Give it to me. All right. That's not the right chapter either. Oh, come on. You can see I'm really adept at my issues here. Let's see. All right, that was that one. This is this one, chapter 2. This is supposed to be chapter 3. All right, so this should be chapter 3. The statue itself was like 90 feet high and 9 feet wide. If your Bible says cubits, that's what it pretty much equals out to. 90 feet high, about 9 feet wide, and it was made of overlaid gold. Otherwise, it would be way too heavy to transport out to the plain of Dura. And by the way, plain of Dura, if you know anything about what happened in Genesis, should ring a bell. That's where the Tower of Babel was. In fact, an archaeologist in that area has found a huge square foundation base thing where they think that's where the Tower of Babel was, and it could be that this statue was placed right on that same platform. It was tall so that a whole crowd of probably thousands could all see it from the very back. They could still see the statue above. Have you ever been to like a church or something, or even this situation where the pastor sits on the same level as everybody else, and if you're like more than 3 rows back, you can't see. That's kind of the thing. So they made it very tall. That's why stages are lifted up off the floor, and that so everybody has a chance to see, so that everybody can see this thing. It was taller than the Colossus of Rhodes. Have you ever heard of that guy? He was one of the 7 wonders. Here's like an artist's depiction of what he was like. And luckily enough, they didn't include the private parts. But you can see how this statue was pretty huge. What is going on? All my slides are off. All right, where is the slide I want? Grr. All right, just a second. I am going to fix this. I just did this yesterday and made sure everything was great. All right, so I apologize for the intrusion. Maybe I moved.
Do we actually know what the statue is? It just says name it.
What's that? We don't know the identity of who the statue was or anything like that.
Or even if it was a person, it just says it was an image.
Yeah, we don't know. It's just said an image set up by, yeah. Where's my first slide? Did I lose it? I lost my first slide, or did it move to somewhere else? All right, no. I lost my first slide.
Wow.
It went somewhere. All right, okay. Well, we'll just go from here. All right, so here's some things to note about this statue. First off, Nebuchadnezzar set it up. That is a repeated thing that the statue Nebuchadnezzar made. He was emphasizing his own power and his control over everybody. The fact that it was made out of overlaid gold probably harkened back to the dream that he had had probably 10 years earlier with the statue with the head of gold, and he was the head of gold. And by making the whole thing gold, he was like telling God and the world, my kingdom will last forever. There's not going to be silver and bronze and then iron. My kingdom is going to make it through. And he was establishing himself as the preeminent power. We don't know who the statue represented. It could have been Nebuchadnezzar at the top of that thing. It could have been, let me go back to, where are we? Yep, could have been Nebuchadnezzar at the top of this thing. It could have been one of the gods. It could have been a combination of the two because kings tended to deify themselves at that time. But it was really, really clear this was a power play on the part of Nebuchadnezzar. He wanted people to know. The purpose was that he wanted to establish his dominance over the then known world as far as he had conquered it. Egypt was still problematic. Assyria and those guys to the north were still problematic. But he wanted to establish his power and dominance over the entire world. And he wanted to be sure that all of his government officials, who were the guys that were called to be assembled in this plain of Dura, he wanted to assure that all his government officials were loyal to him. This is him consolidating his power. After conquering all these nations and integrating people from the different nations that he had overtaken, he wanted to consolidate his power and assure that everybody was loyal. He probably had inklings that there was a lot of palace intrigue going on and there were people working at cross purposes to what he was wanting to do. And so he went through great expense and huge effort to bring his entire government together in one place. From all the provinces, all the peoples, all the nations he had conquered, he brought them all in one place, one huge crowd. Imagine there's no real estimation of what the crowd size was. I tend to think of it as kind of like a couple thousand people, maybe 5,000, because they had to have a band of all these various instruments. We'll get into that in a minute to announce things. So they really were working hard to establish that, all right, your past allegiances are gone. Your allegiance is now to Nebuchadnezzar. Got it? Cool? All right, so let's keep going. So totalitarian states like this Babylonian one, they will allow the other faiths as long as those other faiths are secondary to theirs. And that was why Nebuchadnezzar had assembled. You can have your gods, the Phoenicians and the Lebanese and all these people that had been assimilated into his government. You guys can have your gods. Our gods are more important. And me, Nebuchadnezzar, is numero uno in this place. Everybody got that? All right, so that's what the whole point was. So totalitarian states, this is what we can learn for us here. We'll also, as long as our faith is secondary, our culture places the same pressure on us. Our world that we live in says, hey, you can have your faith. Just don't make it public. Keep your faith to you, and don't force it on anybody else. And in the public sphere, which would include government, which should include schools, which would include civic involvement in the public sphere, even in social media, you're supposed to keep religion out of the public sphere. The separation of church and state is way misinterpreted to mean no religion at all in government, in schools, in anything like that. By the way, the separation of church and state does not mean to keep the state separate. It just means the state is not going to establish and enforce a religion. It was a backlash to when the guys came came to the U.S. from England, and the English church, the Anglican church, was established by the government, and everybody had to go, that kind of thing. So they were just saying, we don't want that here in America. Public schools can teach anything, any hypothesis they want, except to intimate that maybe what we observe in nature points to a designer. You can't do that, because that means that there's a God somewhere, and we can't have that in public schools. We can read any book we want in the study hall except the Bible. Have you ever encountered that? I have. I had it happen to me. You can't read that book in this room. You're supposed to be doing homework, or do some educational reading, or just read a novel, or whatever you want, but don't read the Bible.
It's the only book you can't use as a source in college.
That's right. You can't use the Bible as a source in school. And lastly, do not, by all means, try to influence others to think the way you think. Everybody has their own truth. Let them have their truth. You have your truth, and don't try to influence them. Those are the pressures that our culture puts on us. That's the statue that we're supposed to bow down to. And totalitarian states do that, and they create statues and memorabilia to their people. In fact, even Russia, there's still pictures of Lenin in Moscow and lots of places, and they still have his transparent coffin on display in the thing. So you can... All right, so let's talk about what happened there on the plain of Dura. So all the assembled crowd is told, when you hear the sound of all these instruments, and by the way, the historian who was writing this down was doing a little bit of wordplay on there. All the instruments listed, none of them are Hebrew instruments. They were never used in the temple worship and all that kind of stuff. So there's a little bit of like a little dig there. When you hear all these different instruments make a cacophony of noise, everybody bow. Like on your knees, face to the ground, forehead touching the dirt, So that was the rule. Everybody surrounding this thing, I kind of have you ever seen like videos from the aerial view of the Muhammad's tomb there in Mecca, and when people do they circle around it and all that, and then the guy goes, and they all fall down and point toward it and that kind of thing. So it's just amazing. I have that in my mind when I think of what happened that day on the plain of Dura. The instruments went, and everybody, except 3 guys. I don't know if they were standing together, or if one was over here, one was over there, one was back over here, but 3 guys were standing. And this happened regularly. All right, so okay, everybody back up, and then everybody starts walking around again. When music starts playing, and down they go. 3 guys are standing. So then comes the accusation. Notice what it says in verse, what is it? Certain Chaldeans. Let me find that verse. Therefore, at the time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever, and you've told us to fall down and worship the golden image. Whoever does not fall down will be cast into a burning fiery furnace." Then in verse 12 they go, "There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you, nor do they serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." All right, so certain Chaldeans, those are the guys who were the astrologers. They were the locals. and they were Babylonian by birth, and when they became in that wise men department, they focused on studying the stars and trying to figure out what the stars were trying to say. So that even when Jesus was born, certain wise men from the east saw the star. Guess where those wise men came from? My guess is Babylon. So certain Chaldeans came. They were the local boys, and they said, these Howleys, they don't pay attention to you. They don't worship your gods. They don't bow down and worship the image. Now, they didn't say Howleys, of course. Certain Chaldeans, but we do see Bronze Age anti-Semitism in this verse. Certain Jews. They could have just said 3 guys, but no, they had to bring the ethnic stuff into it. Certain Jews. So we have to be careful ourselves when we make judgments about people based on their ethnicity as well. We have to see the person, not the ethnicity. These guys obviously were very concerned about them because they were jealous that these guys from Judah, which is kind of like, Podunk's town, are in charge of us, and we're the homeboys? This is not right. They were jealous of these 3 guys. So they blame out of bitterness. They were malicious in their accusation against him. Their accusation was threefold. They pay no attention to you, Nebuchadnezzar. They just think they do what they want to do. They don't care what you say. They do not serve your gods, well, it's fairly evident, nor do they worship the golden image. So you have 3 accusations against these guys. And so Nebuchadnezzar responds. Oh, but let's answer the question. Where was Daniel in this whole thing? Did he bow down? Do you think? From what we know of his character so far in this book about him, it's hard to believe that he would have joined the crowd and bowed to that thing. Sounds like he wasn't there. Either he was ill, or because he was second in charge, somebody had to keep the shop open. Well, the whole rest of the government went out to this plain about 30 miles away for this big event. Somebody else had to keep things running, So that's my guess, is that he was back at his office doing his job and trying to keep things going and not let anarchy reign while the entire government and police force and firefighters and garbage collectors and everybody was out in this plain. Okay? So that's what my guess. But nobody knows because the Bible doesn't tell us. So now we get to the consequences of nonconformity, verses 19 through 30. So notice how they describe Nebuchadnezzar's response. In verse 19, then Nebuchadnezzar was what? Furious. Yes, he was filled with fury, and the expression of his face was changed against these 3 guys. He was... man, I'm missing a whole section here. I don't know what's going on with my slideshow. I hope it's not screwed up. So, all right, I think it's okay. I think it's right. So Nebuchadnezzar then gives the guys a chance. He says, is it true? He wants clarification. Did you guys really did not bow? Is that true? Now, if you're ready to, when you hear all the music and stuff like that, go ahead and bow. Yeah, everything will be fine. But if not, you're going to become crispy critters. And so they respond with a really, really. They learned from Daniel, I guess, or they had a similar mindset that he did. By the way, yeah, his was furious rage, He gave the three a chance to deny the accusations. He says, is it true? And he ignores the first accusation that you pay no attention to me. He's interacted with these guys on a daily basis, or even weekly or monthly. He knows that they are good employees. They do what they're supposed to do. So he ignores that accusation. He says, is it true that you don't serve our gods or bow down to the image? So he wants some clarification, and then he gives them a second chance. All right, we're going to do it again. When you hear the music's going to come back around. When you hear that sound, go ahead and bow down. If not, into the furnace you go. Sorry, Backblaze is telling me something, and I don't want it to. All right. So he gave them a second chance. And then he did something foolish. He says, if you don't, the furnace is your destiny, and then who is the God that will deliver you out of my hands? That if he wasn't so furious, he may not have been so stupid to make that statement. But he was furious, and so we'll get there. Come on, let's go. And this question really sets up why this whole event is happening. Why God is superintending and being sovereign over this whole event. That question is what's going to get answered. And Nebuchadnezzar needs to learn again, as he did 10 years earlier when he had that dream of the statue, and Daniel told him the interpretation and said, and he came up with, God is the God who reveals things. God's kingdom will never end. God is over and above everybody, all that kind of thing. He had forgotten that message. By the way, some people think, this is just as an aside, the Tower of Babel's purpose was to unite humankind and to make sure that we all had one language and one government. And that's when God split everybody apart and sent them off with different languages. Some people think that this statue was a secondary attempt to recreate that situation. Here we have the representatives of the whole world here, and they're all bowing to the same thing. We're uniting them, and all peoples, all nations, all tongues, all languages, all that kind of stuff. So there's that little aside. That's just for free. All right? So the guys answer him with faith and with courage. First off, they go, we have no need to answer you. Is not like, oh, up yours. It was, King, you know what it is. We're open books to you. But you don't need to answer to you this thing. You know that we serve you. We don't serve the gods. But we don't need, we're good. But we want you to know, this is a better translation that I went through the Hebrew and did all the verbs and all the weird things. This is a translation that I found that makes the best sense of what their answer was. Their answer was, if the God whom we serve is willing to save us, that's the phrase that trips up a lot of translators, because sometimes they say, if God is able, like maybe he can do it, maybe he can't, maybe he's not strong enough. No, that's not the case. So if God whom we serve is willing to save us, then he will do so. But even if he chooses not to do so, we will not serve your gods or bow down to the image of gold that you have set up. Whew, that took courage. You're talking to the leader of the world and saying, sorry, we're not going to do that. So you already know that Nebuchadnezzar has a temper problem, right? If things don't go his way, he gets really angry really fast. This is the point I wanted to make. God hasn't promised us the grace to face all possible situations, but he has promised to give us the grace to sustain us through the ones that we do experience. So these guys are saying, even if he doesn't save us, we're not changing. But we're hopeful that he does. So that God hasn't promised the grace to face all possible situations, but he has promised to sustain us in the ones we do experience. And the other question or point I was wondering is how little is required to make us bow to the golden statues in our experiences. How, to me, it doesn't require a whole lot. It doesn't require threatening me with flames in a furnace. It just requires maybe somebody misunderstanding me and getting it ticked off at me, or somebody judging me, or somebody, and I just don't want people to do that, so I tend to compromise. And I bet you do too. But I don't know you well enough to say for sure. So Nebuchadnezzar's overreaction. Notice that the verse says he was filled with fury. Fury. And he got irrational. He went over the top with what he said. He said, heat this furnace up 7 times hotter than it's supposed to be. Now, what do you know about the word number 7? A complete number. In the ancient world, it was the number of to the brim kind of thing. Full. No more could be added. In fact, a lot of the ancient cultures had a 6-digit numbering system. So they went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 21, 22, 20. You get the idea? So 7 was like beyond the 6 numbering system. So here's what the furnace may have looked like. It was had these walls around up here. You throw the fire stuff in there. And then you pull the ashes and everything out of this opening. But this opening is important to get the air moving through and up so that it can burn really hot. Okay. By standing right here and looking in there.
Yeah, but you would have been killed.
What's that? No, if you're this is where the fire was. If you're standing down here, you can look through that door and see the fire inside there. Now that's not the furnace. That's not it. That's one from a ancient foundry in England, I think. But that's the way they built them back then. So he made it 7 times hotter, and then he overreacted again. And he says, take the best soldiers we have. The Green Beret guys, the special ops guys. Take these guys, bind these 3 guys up, these 3 men up, have our best soldiers carry them up here and toss them in. And what does it say happened to those soldiers? They burst into flames. They tossed the guys in and then fainted from the heat and burst into flames. Nebuchadnezzar, it cost him some of his best guys to do this. And then we get to the really cool part, the miraculous deliverance. After the fire had subsided a bit and they could see inside, Nebuchadnezzar goes, hey, wait. How many guys got tossed in? 3. Because he's wondering, did one of the soldiers fall into, maybe we got an extra person thrown in there on mistake, who knows? So they go, yeah, we only threw in 3. He says, how come I see 4? And one of them looks like a son of the gods. So the king asked for clarification. Was it 3? And he says, I see them in their unbound, which means the ropes that they had tied them up with were gone. They were walking around in that furnace. They weren't just off to the side where the fire wasn't, because the thing was so filled with flames. They were in the midst of the fire, unhurt. And the 4th one looks like a son of the gods. Now, if you were in the ancient Near East at this time, a son of the gods would mean maybe like a demagogue kind of thing, like a child of of a god and a human or something. You know, they had all these mythology kind of stuff going on. It looks like he didn't say the Son of God. It's like a son of the gods. So there's a couple possibilities about who this being was. One is he was an angel that was sent by God to be with these guys during their ordeal. And we know that angels can take human form, and so that, but somehow this guy looked different from regular humans. The other possibility that some scholars think is that this is called a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus. That God himself.
What would have made him look different in this fire?
Who knows? Maybe the angels are described as shining.
I know, but that's
so.
quite a bright thing.
Yes,
Bright in the
exactly. But it could have been a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ. I'm getting a little teary-eyed about this, but that God himself would honor these three young men. Well, they were 30-year-old by now. That he would honor them in such a way. What mercy. That took me by surprise. So what happened afterwards? So Nebuchadnezzar comes to the mouth of the thing once the heat had died down enough that he could get close enough, and he calls out and says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God. Man, I'm getting emotional about this. And I don't do that. Then he responds, when they come out and they examine them and go, hey, the ropes are the only things that are gone. They don't even have the smell of smoke on them. I mean, when I barbecue steaks at home with my Weber charcoal grill and I'm standing there, I smell like smoke the rest of the day or evening, you know. There wasn't even the smell of smoke on these guys. Everybody was in awe of going, what happened here? And then verse 27 repeats all the list of officials, the satraps, the prefects, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and all that kind of stuff. They all looked around. They were going, holy cow, this is real? This really happened? So then Nebuchadnezzar says, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. A lot of scholars think that he probably didn't say that right, that at that point he was too gobsmacked to, make coherent sentences, but this is something that came afterwards in an acknowledgement of the event, okay? So he was like, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He did not misread the event. He said, they set aside the king's command. They defied me in order to honor their God. Which, I can't think of a braver thing to do. And then he issues a decree. And a decree was not necessarily a law, but it was like a public statement. It's kind of like when we lower our flags half-mast to honor somebody or make the whole nation aware that we're really sad about something. He issued a decree that says this. Therefore, I make a decree. Any people, nation, or language, notice the repetition of all that stuff, that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and here we go again, shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins, for there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. Remember what the question that he asked earlier was? And what God is there who can deliver you from my hand? And in his decree, he says, for there is no other God who can rescue.
If it's not a law, then how could he issue the punishment?
Well, that's true, but yeah, he's a despot. He can do stuff like that. It was, in other words, it wasn't a law that was put in the books and made a permanent thing. This was like a decree, a different kind of thing. So now was the point of this whole issue, was to try to teach Nebuchadnezzar that he wasn't all that God is all that. And I think he might have gotten the point. But we'll find out in an hour or so that he didn't really get the point. And he had to be taught a whole nother lesson. Along the way, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego got blessed. And they probably told the story of this event the rest of their lives. I imagine I would. All right, so we're done. Take a break. I don't know who's coming up next, but I'll see you in an hour so I can get my slideshows together, crying out loud.